There are times when your imagination can turn anything at all into the possibility of piracy. Luckily, that's not always how it turns out. Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. Today I'm sharing a story about the time with our encounter with pirates. Or were they? Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Julie Bradley, best-selling author of two sailing classics, Escape from the Ordinary and Crossing Pirate Waters. Warning, these books are hard to put down. Join Glenn and Julie for off-the-beaten-path adventures in extraordinary places. Claw through Force 10 storms with them and hold your breath through pirate-infested parts of the Mideast. Julie's witty, vibrant writing takes you along every twist and turn. At times, you'll wish you were there, and others, you will be so glad that you were not. These books take you along for the trip of a lifetime. Find both Escape from the Ordinary and Crossing Pirate Waters on Amazon. Highly recommended. It's interesting that this particular podcast is sponsored by Julie Bradley's. One of her books is Crossing Pirate Waters. And absolutely, piracy is a real thing. In certain specific parts of the world, it can be really dangerous to take your cruising boat and go visit just because you want to. If you're worried about or interested in learning how to do some real life digging into places that are safe or not safe, Bean Gifford over at Sailing Totem has a great post about whether cruising is dangerous in the first place. And she spends some time talking about how she researches places that she's going to take her family. She's not going to take her family with her kids on board into places that she feels are really dangerous. And sure, it's all about risk management. She makes it very clear that though there are, yes, places that it's not a good idea to go, just relying on sensational headlines to assess risks isn't really a valid way to go. Remember, trauma and piracy, they sell stories and they sell news. And so it's much easier to find sensational stories about the places that are terrible to go than it is to find the stories about places in those same countries that are just fine. We certainly had our experience in that. We sailed in Venezuela in the early 1990s. We wouldn't go there now, unfortunately, because it's spectacular. It's a place of just incredible beauty and total rewarding exploration. We would love to be able to go back. We have stories, I think actually all of my favorite stories about cruising are from Venezuela, frankly. We have stories about provisioning runs that include going out into the parking lot at one of the shopping malls in Margarita Island and opening every bottle of less than $5 wine we found and swigging them because you couldn't go back to your boat and try them and come back and expect to find the same wine there the next time. You might as well take care of it all at once. One of my very favorite sailing days ever is the day that we raised anchor under sail, left Coche, and spent the day ghosting along, slowly tacking in and out of picturesque bays, maybe going about 2 knots. I think there might have been 5 knots of wind that day. Our final destination may have only been about 10 miles away. It was 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 hours later that we drifted in and we set the hook under sail. It was absolute pure magic and definitely ranks up there as one of my very favorite sailing days ever. Venezuela, though, even back then, was a rough place to be. There was economic unrest in the country, and even sailing on a super small boat, the comparably massive amount of wealth displayed made us a little bit on edge. I remember one night we were anchored in an anchorage, and the next morning 3 separate boats woke up to discover that they had that dive gear that they kept on the side of their boat had gone missing overnight. We decided that we were going to get together and organize an anchor watch. And we did. And we took, I think it was 2-hour watches with the 6 or 7 boats in the anchorage. And we were up with our flashlight and our million candle power spotlight and just making sure that there was nothing happening. The first time that we ever fitted locks inside the companionway was when we were in Puerto La Cruz. And Toby, our very vocal beagle, slept on deck as the 4-legged version of a burglar alarm. more that he was just really happy to see anybody who came to visit, and his bark was louder than the size of him. So he slept on deck, and we locked ourselves down below. And it was in Venezuela that we first got in the habit of hauling our dinghy and locking it to the boat every night. And every time we went to a dinghy dock, we never ever left the hose that connects the gas tank to the outboard in the dinghy. Those had a habit of going walkabout. That said, we enjoyed Venezuela tremendously and never ever felt unsafe, really, until friends of ours had a really scary experience in one of the spectacular bays along the mainland. They had anchored overnight and had a bad encounter with people who jumped out of the bushes to get them to go back to their boat and take everything off the boat. There was nobody hurt at all in the incident, which was superbly scary. But it did give us some pause about solo exploration. We did think about it and talk about it and say, okay, our boat's really small and our dog is really loud. And they had a slightly larger boat and no dog. But still, it made us realize that the stories of unrest were not as far away from us in Venezuela as we thought they were. But just a couple of days after that incident, we headed off from the mainland. We were on our way to Bonaire, and we wanted to explore some of the beautiful out islands of Venezuela, so Blanquilla and the Aves and the Roques. Friends were just a day behind us. We anchored in gorgeous water in Blanquilla. We were the only boat in an isolated anchorage. We weren't going ashore. We weren't worried about any of that. So some of the things that had happened to our friends, we were thinking we were totally fine. But in the morning, with friends still a couple hours away from being with us in the bay, a rough-looking open boat, a panga, came in to the bay and beelined straight towards us. I started to freak out. We didn't have anybody near us. We didn't have a sat phone. There was nothing there. If something happened, we would be in big trouble. I went down below, ready to grab a flare gun, thinking the worst. And Jeremy, who is really good at just being calm, he just said, they probably need water. And he put his hat and sunglasses and a great big smile on and went up on deck. I hid down below and I heard the boat come alongside. I heard Toby barking like crazy. I heard Jeremy friendly voice greeting them. I heard the fast Spanish of the other boaters. And then Jeremy called down, "Hey, can you go to the med kit and get some Advil? They're not feeling well." And they wondered if we have anything that might help with a headache. And the very next day, our pirates came by asking Jeremy to come out to go fishing with them as a thank you for the gift of a couple of pills of painkiller. The lesson that I learned from this particular encounter is that generally, if you go about thinking that people are good, they generally are good. I don't know what the response would have been had I come up on deck with a flare gun and been really anxious and waving them off. I can 100% guarantee that it would not have resulted in an invitation to go fishing and a super fun afternoon for Jeremy. There are definitely places in the world where extra caution is advised. In general, though, if your approach is that people are at their core good people, you'll be proven right time and time and time again. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you where we talk about how awesome people are and who we've met in places that we've been. If this has been entertaining or useful or helpful, please don't forget to subscribe. You'll never miss one. Don't forget to share us with your friends. Have the most spectacular week.